Okay, so I'm gonna take a whole scene from start to finish with this video. So this might be a little bit on the longer side. I'll try to keep it as compact as possible. But in this particular case, we are needing a 5-second animation of our some sort of scene for our cinematic intro. And we sort of have the idea ready for what the shot is going to be, which is going to be it's going to be 5 seconds, right? But it's going to be somewhere along where the camera is going to start really close to the ground and it's going to just fly forward uh, for a few seconds, fairly quickly. So we're going to see the ground in the bottom section of the frame moving quite fast. And then at the end, we're going to have like a little settlement, maybe over a hill or something like that. But that's sort of the idea. The camera's just gonna fly through the terrain. So what I want to do first, when we have sort of the idea ready, I want to sort of set up the camera so I know the things that I need within the frame, right? And so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm gonna get my camera. Let's just move it back. And this is going to be a simple animation, right? It's just gonna be on the one axis, just moving. But I want to first set my ratio for my shot here. And so normally we've been doing 1920 by 800 ratio. And the other thing is I'm going to set up a plane here. Let's make it real long. And this is going to be sort of like my airport track area, right? And this is what's going to help me sort of decide how much space I need. So I'm pretty much blocking out the area that I'm going to be needing here. So let's move the camera back. And the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my person here. I'm going to move it to the center, to the side a little bit. I'm actually going to do an array in this. Talk about this in a second now. This is going to be on the y-axis. Let's do 2 here. So it's going up because I haven't applied my transforms yet. Let's apply that. And I'm going to spade this quite a bit. Let's just add a few. And I'm using this as a way to measure my speed. Because if I just look at the ground with just the plane, I'm not going to really know how fast I'm moving. So I'm going to use this person as I fly next to them to sort of gauge how fast my camera is moving. I'm going to grab my camera, and the other thing is I'm going to go to my timeline. Now 5 seconds, 30 frames per second. We're going to do about, I'm not sure, I see some keyframes here, so I'm just going to select them all and just delete that just in case. We only need 150 frames. So I'm going to go to my settings here. Let's just do 150 here. So I know this is the length of my animation, 5 seconds. And I'm going to start right here. Now I'm going to set up the camera. I want the camera to be lower in the ground, facing up a little bit. Maybe we start right here. So I don't see the border here, and I see that. Great. So let's say this is our frame. We're gonna always sort of, you know, I like to block things out first and then start tweaking them from this. So here, I'm not gonna have any rotation on the camera. I'm still gonna put some frames in there, maybe, but we'll see. I'm gonna press I by hovering over these values, and that sets a keyframe on my frame there. And then lastly, I'm gonna go to my last frame. Let's just move the camera all the way up here. Now we lost some vision here, and this is probably due to my clipping. There we go. So last frame, let's go all the way over here maybe. Let's go here, press I again, that sets a keyframe there. Now, if I go back to the timeline, and I press play. Let's see the animation here. You can see they sort of start slow, fast, and then at the end it sort of starts slow again. That's because of the interpolation of the keyframe. This is a little bit more technical, but if I want a same speed from beginning to end to be the same speed, the only thing I gotta do is press A to select all the keyframes, right click, interpolation mode, and we'll go to linear instead of Bezier. So you can see Bezier has like a curve, right? This one's just linear. So now if I press play, it's always the same speed throughout. Now what I've noticed here, this is very fast. This is definitely way too far. And we're gonna go to the last frame. Let's move the camera back quite a bit. Let's set a keyframe date again, and we'll say it again. This is still too fast. I might overestimate how fast I want this. This is not bad. I actually like this. Yes, I like that. So I know now the distance, right? So I'm just going from here to here. You can see, let's make the camera bigger. From here to here on 5 seconds. And I like this speed. That's not bad. Now I may lower it a little bit more the camera, but I know that the speed and the distance is close to where I want, which is great. So let's get that. Now I'm going to, let's go to the last frame. I'm going to mark with my plane where I want this. Let's go over here. And I only need about 3, 4, 5 of this scale here. So 5 here. Right. So now we have set that up. Boom, boom, boom. Now the idea that I have in mind, and we'll see if we can make it work, is that as the camera flies through, there might be a character running towards the direction of the camera. So we'll see the character running, but the camera's just gonna pass the character, right? So we only see the character for like a few frames only for the beginning of the shot, and then we're gonna see the actual settlement. And I'm thinking that maybe, you know, I have a look at a little sketch. Let me see if I can find it actually. I have a little sketch here for what I had in mind for this particular shot. This is my sketch here. And so we're going to see the idea is that the foreground element, which is my ground, and the character are going to be moving fast, right? Because we're close to it and the camera's moving fast, but the settlement in the background is slowly going to start getting closer, but the settlement is pretty far away. And so we'll see the settlement in the background, but it's just going to get closer very, very slowly. But the ground here in the foreground is going to move fast. So we may have to trick the effect a little bit, right? Because the thing is that the settlement might be all the way over here, right? But I'm not going to do it actually like this in the scene, right? I'm going to fake it. I might have it here, right? Like here. But it's going to be in a smaller scale, so it looks like it's far away. And so we may have to trick that a little bit. But I like the speed. We could go maybe a little bit faster, right? But if I add a plane or a cube here, let's make this like this. Spell this. So this might be where the let's add some cylinders here. Sort of blocking out the settlement here. let's go back. This might be a terrain that it's maybe like a hill. It's not fully flat. So maybe over here starts dipping a little bit. So at the beginning, maybe it's closer to the camera. Maybe there's like other hills over here, right, that we can see. And so that's sort of the idea. And so I like to block things out like this first. Just gonna get the general sense, and now I can come up with a better plan on how to tackle this, right? And so my first order of, and you know, this setup's not final, of course, but like that. Right. So my first order of business that I want to tackle first is this area right here. So I'm going to treat this as layers, right? There's going to be one layer here. It's going to be one layer here. There might be another layer here, and then my settlement back here. And of course, whatever background I have at the end. But I want to treat this as layers and then tackle them individually. So the first thing I want to do is the terrain area here. And so I already have my terrain files here. I'm just going to use these. So I'm just going to grab them, copy them, and paste them here. I'm going to move all this into a collection. Let's call this base model or block out. I'm going to have them non-selectable just so I can play with the area without worrying about moving stuff. And I'm literally just going to start using these and start placing them like this. Right? Start placing them and playing with the size of them. Right? And I'm gonna go almost not frame by frame, but in different areas, right? So I'll set it up here, I'll set it up here, set it up here, set it up here. See how that looks all throughout the animation. But I'm literally just gonna copy and paste what I have here and just start populating this frame here or this plane here into my scene. Now, as you can see, I'm not worried about lighting, textures right now. We can always deal with that later. I just want to deal with the general effect, right? Let's see how we can populate it. So since this is going to be a very repetitive process, I'm going to treat this as a time lapse. You're gonna see me that I would do things like, let's say for example, I have this one here. Let's move that here. This area here, I'm gonna apply all the modifiers. I'm just gonna get rid of this here. Let's leave that. And sometimes you will see me that I will, not particular in this particular case here, but I would do things like, let's move this here around. Let's go a little bit forward. Maybe here. Let's rotate this. You know, I may have something like this where I see the edge of the model, right? So I can go into edit mode. Well, let's apply the modifiers. Go into edit mode. Now select these over here. And with my proportional editing, I'm just gonna move these a little bit. Just like that. It's a little touch. Same thing here. Just to hide that sort of corner there. And so there's a lot of tweaking and moving that will need to take place. But I'm gonna play with this area, right, for a little bit, and then we'll move on to the next thing. All right, so this is what I have so far. Let's take a look here. I'm gonna play this here. Got some of the terrain, got some of the background, but it's a little bit, you know, I get the general idea, but it's a little bit hard now to start seeing most of the details and stuff because there's some lighting and texture, and so I don't know how this whole scene is going to look. But I got the general base idea, you know, the settlement sort of like on a plateau, maybe like a crater around it or something like that, right? And so now we went back to the cinematic and we only actually need 4 seconds. So instead of 150, we're gonna do 120 frames. And so we're gonna have to adjust a little bit the animation here. I also wanna do some changes to the animations, just very little changes. And so you can see that now these frames are sort of outside of the 4 seconds. So I'm just gonna grab these and move them here. Now this is going to make it a little bit faster because we gotta get to that point faster in less time. But that's still looking pretty good. Now the thing that I want to try and do here is I want to almost have the camera at the beginning to look down into the terrain, and then as it moves forward, it's gonna start panning or tilting up into what we see here, which is straightforward, right? So here it's a little bit like this, and like that as it moves forward. And so I want to see how that will look, that sort of effect might look like. And so the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to go to the first frame, go here, and now we're going to play with the rotation. So I'm going to look down here, maybe have it up just like that. I'm going to put keyframes here. And let's see, so it's going to go like that. And now on the last frame, since we didn't have any rotation, I'm going to go up like this. Let's see how that looks like. So we'll go back, we play, and now it's going up. Now we're gonna have to play with the timing because I want the camera to look down a little bit more and then tilt up right at the end. So we may have to play with the curves, and the way we're gonna do that, this is getting a little bit more into the editing of the animation. Still very simple, but we're gonna go into the graph editor. And this rotation here is my rotation X on the X axis. And so if I go down here and find it, this is going to be X over here. You're gonna see that, move this up. You're gonna see that it starts over here and it's gonna go up a little bit. So this is my X rotation. Let's see. So now we just need to play with this curve here. So we have our Z rotation, X, Y, and all that. So we're gonna start 67. Let's see up here. And so now if we grab the X, we're gonna find the point here. And this might be interpolation. Let's put a Bezier. We're gonna play with that curve. It's not going to be a lot actually. It's just going to be a little bit. Just so we can extend the time that is looking down. The other thing that we could do is, I'm gonna go back here now that I'm thinking about it. Again, I'm no expert animator, but what we can do is actually extend the time that this is looking down. So the X-axis, so maybe at 0.60 here, halfway through the animation, we can put the same value of the first frame of the rotation. And so I'm gonna go back to the first frame. I'm gonna Control C over here on the X here. I'm gonna go to my frame and then paste that here, Control V. And now I'm gonna put my keyframe, pressing I. And so now it's going to be looking down more, and then it goes up. Or it could be even subtle. So I could increase this just a little bit. Put another keyframe there. So it's slowly going up. So that's looking a little bit better actually. Yeah, and it's just a very short scene. But we might see the character like on this side here. So we just pass him right at the end. So we can see him running and then we just pass him. it's gonna work out well. So this is progress, right? I don't want to get it 100% nailed right now. I don't need to. I just want to get some progress on it. Now I can move on to something else. So I'm liking the progress on the animation itself. So let's save that. Now, to start seeing some of these, I'm actually going to, because we have our camera here. Well, I want to see this with some lighting. Start putting some lighting atmosphere in so we can start nailing the look of this. Now, I want to keep the same set of lighting scenario as some of my other scenes. So for example, I have this scene here, which I really like the lighting and the setup that I have for this. And so I'm going to use the same set of setup for this one. And the way I can do that is by just going to the file of it. So this is the file for that animation there. Right, so we start over here. So it'll go forward and then see this down here. I'm going to copy, this is my atmosphere cube. So I'm going to copy that. I'm going to copy also my background images and my light, which I only have one on this scene. I'm just going to copy that, Control C, go back to my scene here. Let's bring this down. And I'm just going to Control V. Now this seems like a bigger image, so I'm just going to increase this a little bit more. I'm going to start organizing this a little bit. So this is my atmosphere cube. This is going to be my background images. Light. I'm going to bring this up. I'm going to make this bigger. I want to make sure that on my last shot, I can actually see everything there. Now we'll play with this, the actual images later, but just want to make sure that it's getting covered. Save that. Let's see how this looks. Let's go to frame this one here. Now I'll probably be using cycles for this, and this is going to take just a little bit more. But let's go to cycles here, which is going to look different than what we see here on Eevee. Hopefully we don't have to do as much. So I like what I'm seeing, except, I mean, this is very red. We'll have to play with this. Let's go into our shader editor. It's really nice there. Let's go ahead and liken the lighting the way it is. Let's bring our timeline here. I'm liking what I'm seeing. I can even go into my properties here, down to volumes, light paths. And on the volume, I can let more light go through it. So right now it's at 0. If I go to like 4, see there's more light. 10. It's even more there. I sort of like that bluish sort of glow that I'm getting. It's kind of nice, actually. From this. Now the question is, do I really need the same sort of scenario, right? Which I don't think it's a huge deal, right? If I go, let's say like 4 here, or even 12. Oops. right? This could be another time of the day or something like that, right? So it's really sort of like a personal choice, I think. But I sort of like this. I like the bluish sort of color. I think it's nice. Let's go back here. And of course, we can play with the angle of the light. Right now, I think this is working, right? But you can always play with that. Now, it will be kind of cool, maybe, if we can get the general foreground element, all of these over here, in shadow. So we can actually bring to life even more this background area. And depending on the light direction right now, so we have this sort of light here. This image here is bugging me a little bit. Let's move it back. This light is coming in this direction here. And I have my foreground element over here. So I think if we can bring, let's bring a UV sphere. Let's make it really big. Let's bring it here. I want to make sure I'm not blocking any lighting into this area here, right? Let's see. So maybe I can, let's use a cube actually. Select this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to delete one of the faces. So this face I'm going to delete. Let's bring it here. Let's move it back. And so what I'm doing is I'm working in cycles. Technically what I'm doing is I am using geometry to sort of block light coming into this cube space here, right? And so the tighter I make it, the less light that it will come in, and so the darker it will look. So you're gonna see that the deeper I go with the camera, because I'm deeper into the cube, the less light comes in. Which is sort of what I want. Like it may be kind of cool to even put some like, I'm thinking to like cables. Let's say there's like a settlement over here behind the camera, but this is like right next to a canyon or a big rock or something. So we have all these shadows and there's like cables running through the same path that the camera. So we're almost following the cables, right? And the cables sort of go into the distance downhill. And then we reveal the other sort of like settlement, maybe with some like antennas and stuff like that over here in the background. And that'll be kind of cool. Yeah. So I like that. Now let's get this guy here. We don't need this anymore. I'm gonna place him or her in the place that we want to sort of see it, just to kind of start blocking this out. We just want to get a glimpse of it. Maybe we could even fly over the character. Maybe. It's another choice. I don't want to concentrate too much on the character. Yeah, I think that could work. All right, great. I think this is progress. Now, since I'm using cycles, right, I am, one of the things that I'm going to start doing is I'm going to start taking some sort of like HD renders of every other frame. So maybe here, 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 and the last frame, maybe like 4, maybe 5, just to kind of get the overall sense, because it's kind of hard to see with the denoise here on the screen. And so if I take a nice render, it's going to allow me to start really seeing how this is starting to shape up. So I'm going to do those renders now just to kind of see what it looks like. And I think the stage after that is going to be, if those renders look good, it's going to start just populating this with the actual sediment, which is going to be super easy because we're just going to go to our original file and start pasting stuff in here, right? We have a bunch of buildings already made and all that, so that's going to be a very easy thing to do. We don't need to worry about a lot of details either because we're pretty far away, so we don't need to like really set dress anything. And so but I want to see how this looks like on like a final HD sort of one shot render in some of these shots. So I'll do those and then we'll share those and go through those and see how those look like. Okay, so let's take a look at the renders here just to kind of see where we are. I made 4 renders in between the animation, and this is for me to gauge sort of like what's going to be the next steps and sort of how everything is going with the look and everything. Now, overall, I like the look and feel, the mood, the lighting, the colors that I'm getting. I'm liking that. I don't think I'm gonna change that as much. I like the light direction. I like the darkness that I get at the beginning comparison to at the end, where it's open and bright. And I like the simplicity of the shot as well. I may play with maybe having something here in the background, like an asteroid or something like that. But that might come later. And so I'm looking at these renders, right? And I don't mind the texture, it's going to be pretty dark in here. So I like the forms that I'm getting, some of that light coming from the top of the sky. Even though we're in shadow, all these lights coming from the top because of the sky. And I don't mind this. I don't mind these either. But this feels, especially from this one to, from this one to this one. We don't see the ground on this one, but it might need a little bit more in here. And so one of the things is that we talk about the cables running through. So that's something that I'm going to add for sure. So I'm imagining already the cables going through the terrain in this shot. So it's going to help a lot with adding a little bit of detail to this ground. The other thing is that I might add just some rocks here and there, just kind of populate a little bit more the terrain. So that's number 2. And then lastly, I don't see any problems with the terrain in here. And here, and lastly, I gotta fix this part here so you can see how the model cuts off here. So I'm just gonna extend that somehow here. I don't want to cover too much of this because I like this. I like the almost silhouetted mountain here in the back. but I'm looking for those errors. So you can see here how I'm getting an error here on the plane. Now you might not see this with the actual animation, but if I do a shot or a render, like a still image of this, which I will, right? You know, I can either paint that or I can just fix that in the 3D. Either way is fine. But I'm gonna do those two things on the ground. One of them is the cable, which you guys should know already how I'm going to use that, right? I'm gonna go into my cables and I'm gonna use an array with the curves and add that in. And also I'm gonna use a scatter, maybe a scatter effect to get some little rocks on top of the terrain around here. Either that or I'm gonna just manually put in them depending on the actual shot. But I'm liking what I see. I think I can work with this, to be honest. I think once I do that, then I will go back into this area here because I think that's going to be the easiest and fastest part of it. Just fill this up with like buildings and stuff. I'm not too worried about that. That's probably going to be the very last thing that I'll do. But I'm going to play with those things now here. And again, still the same thing, right? So I'm here. I might want to see maybe how I can bring this a little bit closer to the other hue. So I'm just going to change the hue here a little bit. Let's go into the green. It's a little bit purple there. I don't know. Sort of like the blue. I like the blue. Yeah, let's see here. So this section here is what is getting cut off. And I'm going to take one of these problems at a time, right? So I noticed this. So let's go ahead and fix that. I could even let's duplicate this, move it. I'm going to invert it into the x-axis. So now this is almost the same. Let's jump forward into the animation here. I want to make sure that I don't have those empty areas. So you can see here how I'm getting that line here. I could either go into edit mode here. Let's grab these. Press the G button for moving. I'm just gonna move them down just a little bit. I'm still using proportional editing just so it's a soft transition. Like that. So I'm gonna zoom in here just to kind of see what I'm getting. It's not bad there. So that looks good there. Now there was another issue somewhere around here. Oh, this one here. I'm gonna apply those modifiers. Same thing. Press G for moving. Just bring those down. Just like that. Okay, great. Now, let's go back here. Okay, so I think now I'm gonna go to my original file. I'll do this as a time lapse because it's just a repetitive process, but I'm gonna go into my original file where I have like all my assets and everything. And I am going to get my cables and start putting them throughout this foreground element in here. Okay, so quick little update here. As you see, I added the cables for the terrain here, and I also scattered some rocks on the terrain. And I want to talk to a little bit, we have this sort of animation, right? And one thing that I thought could be cool to have, since we're pretty close to the ground, it's some maybe like a motion blur or something like that. Now, this is the render for this particular frame here, frame 6, which we're pretty close to the ground. Camera's moving fast. I can see the rocks that I have, which is looking pretty cool. I also got the cable, which is also looking pretty cool too. But I did a setup here. I just want to show you the setup. It's a very simple setup for the motion blur, and just took me a few minutes to figure out the actual numbers. I'm gonna go to my compositing here so you can actually see it. You can see here how is that looking. Let me zoom in a little bit more so you can see it. So this is the same shot, right? Same shot, but unfortunately for the you won't see the motion blur on the actual viewport. And let me move this to the side so you can see it. But you can see that I'm getting a little bit of that blur here, which I think is going to add quite a lot, really nice detail when we are moving fast. And so this is the actual setup. I have the composite here, the render layers. I enable my Z and mist, which I'm using for my depth in here. So I attach the depth into Z. And then the vector, which I enable it here, I put it on the speed. And then we pretty much play with the sample. So I added a few more samples, and then the blur is very low, the blur. And so you have to play with that number depending on your scene. But this is sort of like the setup that I have. And so now when I do the rendering for the animation, I'm going to have that nice blur effect in each individual frame. And so it's sort of like a nice touch you have. But now, we're pretty much almost at the end here. I think now, this is all working well. Now the only two things that I can see that, and here you can see how the renders are looking. This is another update with the cables, right? No motion blur in this, but the cables are looking good there, right? I'm liking the lighting, liking the mood. Of course, there's a few things here that could be fixed, but this is an old one that's already been fixed. And this is the last shot. This will be a kind of cool shot if maybe I have the character here for a still image. I've had the character here standing, blurred out, sort of like looking into the settlement. That would be kind of cool. But yeah, so I think next we're going to make sure that everything is working where it's supposed to go, right? Just make sure that all the little details are there. And now I am going to do two things generally. The first one is going to be the settlement in the background. So we're going to just to copy the models from our original file, right, for the asset, and they're just going to place them here based on that. Similar setup here. I'm not going to change too much of the actual setup, but we're going to replace those. And then the other thing is going to be our character. I'll probably do a different video for the character, but we're just going to place him in there. It's going to have some running animation maybe, and we're going to time it with the camera so we can actually see it running. And then we'll be good to start rendering this thing out. But first of all, we're gonna do a time lapse of the actual settlement back here and adding that character in, and then we'll go back and reassess what we have. All right, so here we are with an update here. As you saw, I added the buildings here. No need to go past this point with the terrain, all that, since we don't actually see that. But you can see sort of the little bit of setup over here. I added another one over here as well, just kind of bring a little bit more depth into this. So maybe they have like different settlements and stuff. And when I'm working with scenes like this where I have this animation and all this stuff happening, um, sometimes I gotta get to a point where I just gotta render it overnight just to kind of see what is sort of like looking like. And so that's pretty much the next step. Now, hopefully everything works out. The animation finishes in time. By the time usually I wake up, I check it out, and I don't see any errors on the animation or the models or anything like that. But most times I miss something just because of the nature of, I gotta go see the whole thing from 0 to, whatever the frames are. And then sort of kind of try to figure that out, right? And I can only see that with the final sort of render for it. And I could, for example, do like a very quick, super low quality sort of render. But for animations like this, usually it takes me 2 overnights or maybe 1 overnight for this one. I am hoping. I started rendering some frames. I only have 4 of them, but let me show you here. And so you can see that I'm getting that motion blur, and it's only 4 frames. And for the looks of it, it's looking fine. So I'm not super worried about doing the final overnight. But I'm gonna put it to render and then show you guys on the next part what does that look like. And if it's finished, it's finished. If it's not, then we'll go through the things that we need to change. Okay, so I have here the final render for this particular scene. Let's check it out here. So at first glance, I don't see any major big issues in terms of like placement of things and timing and all that. Yes, I think the timing could be, the animation itself could be a lot better. This is a very short scene, as you saw in the sort of like little teaser. And like if you go frame by not frame by frame, but by areas, like there's some things that we could probably fix, like the space here in between here. Um, the animation of the character is very simple, right? And we're getting like errors, not errors, but things like this that we can definitely tweak and fix. But for this particular shot and purpose of this, like I'm okay with it. So like this area here could be fixed. You can barely notice those things as you're moving, because you're mostly looking around and looking at the base as it comes out. So you're not really looking for those things for the most part. But for what we want, this is good. And so we'll plug this into the cinematic, as you saw, and that concludes the scene making of this. Now I normally do like a one still image shot, or like a render where I take it a little bit further, but just like one still image. And I'll probably do something where I have like probably the last shot, something like this, maybe with some characters or something. And I can show you here base render. So this is me working. This is still not worked in, but got some characters. I got some masteries at the top, some rocks that I had, and I have to push the rocks back, of course, and play with the image itself. But I normally do like at least one still image from my renders, from my animations. And so this will be another video, right? I'll take this to find out. There's really not a lot to do to this. There's still a few things that I definitely need to do, like clean it up. We can push the terrain a little bit more, push this back and all that. But I'll talk about that in the next video.